You ever wake up and just know something's off? That was me, on what I thought would be a normal Saturday morning. I stretched, yawned, and looked out the window. And that's when I saw it. A bunch of cars, all lined up along the street. None of them looked familiar. My driveway, which is usually empty, had something big parked across it. And I mean big. At first, I thought maybe someone was lost. Or maybe there was an emergency on the street. But no, it wasn't anything like that. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. There it was, a long white limousine, stretched from one end of my driveway to the other, parked perfectly across the only way in or out of my house. Just sitting there, like it belonged. I stood there for a second, totally confused. Why would a limo be blocking my driveway? Who would do that? I wasn't expecting any visitors. No parties. No deliveries. Nothing. And then it hit me. There was only one person in the neighborhood bold enough to do something like this. Karen. Now, you need to know a bit about her. She's the president of our neighborhood HOA. Lives 2 houses down. Always watching. Always judging. The type of neighbor who reports your grass if it's half an inch too long. The kind who sends email complaints if your trash bins are left out for more than 20 minutes. Yeah, that kind. She's a self-proclaimed queen of the block. Thinks everything should go her way. And if it doesn't, she'll make a problem. I've had a few run-ins with her before. Nothing huge. Just petty stuff. One time she called the HOA because my fence wasn't the right shade of brown. Another time, she told my guests to repark because she thought they were too close to her side. You get the picture. But this was next level. I threw on a hoodie and went outside. The limo just sat there, engine off, no one inside. I looked around. Still early. Maybe 8:30 a.m. The street was unusually busy for a Saturday. People were decorating their lawns, hanging white ribbons, setting up chairs, tables. It looked like some kind of wedding was being planned. That's when I realized this wasn't just a regular day. This was an event. Then I saw Karen, clipboard in hand, barking orders at some teenagers, putting up a flower arch right in front of her house. She was wearing a pastel pink pantsuit and had her hair done up like she was in charge of a royal parade. Everything around her looked like it was moving to her command. I walked over, calm but clearly annoyed. "Hey!" I said, "Do you know whose limo that is?" She didn't even turn to look at me, just waved her hand and said, "It's fine. It'll be gone soon." I blinked. "It's blocking my driveway." "Yes," she said, turning to me with that fake smile she always uses when she's trying to act polite. "It's my daughter's wedding today. The limo's just here to pick people up. Don't make a fuss." Don't make a fuss? My car was trapped. I had plans, errands, not to mention, what if there was an emergency? But Karen didn't care. She never does. In her mind, everything is temporary when it's her doing it. But if anyone else tries something like that, instant violation notice. "I need it moved," I said. She rolled her eyes like I was the difficult one. "It's just for a few hours. You'll survive." I stood there for a second, trying not to lose it. This was the kind of behavior that made people snap. But I did want to give her that satisfaction. I turned around and went back to my house, clenching my jaw. I stared at the limo from my front window, still parked like it owned the place. Time ticked by. I made coffee, tried to distract myself. But every time I glanced outside, that giant white beast was still there. People were arriving, dressed up, smiling, taking pictures in the street, blocking the sidewalks. Meanwhile, I was stuck inside like a prisoner. At some point, I even tried calling the HOA. No answer. Not surprising. Karen probably made sure no one else was around today. Total power play. I paced around the house. Tried calling a friend. Explained what happened. They couldn't believe it either. "That's insane," they said. "Who does that?" Exactly. I went outside again around 10 a.m. Still blocked. Still no one near the limo. I checked the license plate. It was from a rental service. Probably one of those fancy ones you book online. I didn't want to touch the car, but I thought about leaving a note. Something like, "You're blocking private property. Move ASAP." But what would that do? Karen was the mastermind here. People started arriving in groups now, dressed to the nines, heels clicking on pavement, men in suits carrying coolers and camera gear. I was starting to feel like the one out of place, like I wasn't even part of my own neighborhood, and all because of Karen. There's something about being ignored in your own space that just hits different. It's not just the inconvenience, it's the disrespect. The assumption that your space, your time, your rights, none of it matters. Because someone else decided their day is more important. I watched from behind my front door as the wedding setup grew. Music equipment was being wheeled in. Speakers, lights, a mic stand. Someone was even setting up a white aisle across the center of the road, like it was a Hollywood movie. This wasn't just a backyard wedding. It was a full-blown street event. And there I was, trapped. The worst part? No one even came to check. Not one person knocked on my door to ask if it was okay. Not one, "Hey, sorry for the inconvenience." Nothing. Just silence. Like I didn't exist. I thought about calling the cops. But then what? A ruined wedding? Headlines? Drama? I didn't want that either. I just wanted respect. A little decency. Common sense. But Karen wasn't built for common sense. She was built for control. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, wondering what to do next. The more I thought about it, the more one thought kept growing in my mind. If Karen could break the rules when it suited her, maybe it was time I did the same. Because if my driveway wasn't mine anymore, well, maybe I could make it really mine again, in the loudest, most inconvenient way possible. And that the boat had been sitting in my backyard for months. I used to take it out every other weekend when life was a bit calmer. Lately, I hadn't had the time. It was a small fishing boat on a trailer. Nothing fancy, but it was wide, bulky, and very, very inconvenient to move around once it was parked. And suddenly, it felt like the perfect solution. If Karen thought it was okay to block my driveway with a limo for her daughter's wedding, then maybe I could block that same limo right back, with something much harder to move. Something with wheels that I could legally park. Something that, technically, I had every right to place anywhere on my property. I headed to the backyard. The tarp was still over the boat. I pulled it off, brushed off a few leaves, and hitched the trailer to my SUV. I wasn't in a rush. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I pulled out slowly, drove around the block, and came back toward my house from the opposite direction. My driveway was still blocked. The limo hadn't moved an inch. It was still sitting there like a king on a throne, looking ridiculous. Karen was now standing in the middle of the road, directing guests like she was hosting an awards show. She spotted me coming and narrowed her eyes. I slowed the car right in front of my house, lined up the trailer, and began backing in. That's when she started walking toward me. Fast. "What are you doing?" she called out, waving her arms like I was flying a plane into her front lawn. I rolled down my window. "Parking," I said simply. "You can't block the limo." I smiled. "That limo's parked in my driveway. I can park on my own property if I want." She looked like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out at first. But you're going to trap it in." "Yeah," I said, nodding. "I know." Then I shifted into reverse and backed the trailer in slowly, perfectly boxing the limo with the boat. The gap between them was tight, maybe 2 feet. Not enough for the limo to get out unless someone came and moved the boat. And I wasn't planning to move it any time soon. Karen stood frozen, her clipboard hanging at her side. For a second, she looked like she was about to throw it at my windshield. "You're ruining everything," she hissed. I shut off the engine and stepped out. "Funny. That's exactly what you did when you parked a wedding limo in my driveway without asking. You're being petty." "No, I'm being equal." She stared at me like I was a wild animal, like I'd broken some sacred neighborhood law. But I hadn't. Not a single rule. The boat was on my property. I hadn't touched the limo. I hadn't blocked the road. I hadn't said a word to her guests. I had just parked. Nothing more. By now, a few people had started watching. Some wedding guests, a few neighbors. I saw Mr. Reynolds from across the street shake his head and smile, like he'd been waiting years to see someone stand up to her. Karen turned and stormed off toward the limo. She yanked open the back door and yelled something to the driver. I couldn't hear what she said, but the guy looked confused. He stepped out, looked at the boat, then at me. I gave him a nod. He gave me a shrug. It was clear he didn't want to be involved in any of this. Minutes passed. Karen paced. She was on her phone, probably calling the HOA. Or maybe her husband. Or both. But I knew she wouldn't get far. Today, she'd pushed too far, and the consequences were finally catching up. I went back inside, made another coffee, sat at the window and watched. It was better than TV. The wedding was still going ahead. Guests were being seated. A white runner had been placed down the center of the street, and someone had scattered petals along it. Folding chairs lined either side. A little girl was practicing tossing flowers from a small basket. Music started to play faintly from a speaker somewhere near Karen's garage. But none of it distracted from the limo, which now looked completely trapped. Around noon, the bride appeared. She looked beautiful, honestly. Long white dress, hair curled perfectly, makeup flawless. She was standing in Karen's front yard, flanked by a small group of bridesmaids. They all had the same confused look on their faces. I could see Karen trying to explain, pointing toward my house, waving her arms like a coach at halftime. But the limo wasn't moving, and now everyone knew why. A few more minutes passed. Then Karen came marching back toward my house. She didn't knock. She stood on the sidewalk and shouted, "Move the boat." I opened the door. "Sorry, not right now. You're holding my daughter hostage on her wedding day." She's not inside the limo. She's standing right there. "You're being unreasonable." "No," I said, stepping outside again, calm as ever. "I'm being you." She stared at me, then looked around, like maybe someone would back her up. But most of the guests were busy pretending not to watch. Even the limo driver had disappeared. Karen lowered her voice, tried a new angle. I didn't think it would be a problem. It was just going to be for an hour or two. "Exactly," I said. "And now so is this." She clenched her fist, took a deep breath, then turned and walked away. I watched her go. She didn't say anything else. Back inside, I sat down again. This time I smiled, because I could feel it. Things were shifting. For once, Karen wasn't getting her way, and she didn't know what to do about it. The next thing I noticed was the limo driver reappearing. He was on his phone, talking to someone, pacing in small circles. I guessed he was trying to explain why he couldn't pick up the bride. Eventually, he got into the driver's seat, turned on the engine, and just sat there, waiting, hoping the boat would disappear. It didn't. Karen didn't come back again for a while. Maybe she was trying to come up with a new plan. Or maybe she was realizing that there wasn't one. Not this time. The wedding began around 12:30. Right there in the middle of the road. The groom walked down the makeshift aisle with a stiff smile. The guests clapped politely. A man in a tan suit stood under a flower arch and began speaking into a mic, welcoming everyone. It could have been beautiful, if not for the trapped limo humming in the background, and the boat sitting in front of it like a brick wall, and me sipping coffee, watching it all unfold. The ceremony moved forward. I could hear pieces of it through the windows. Vows, laughter, the occasional awkward pause. But the energy outside had changed. People weren't just there for a wedding anymore. They were watching something else unfold. Karen stayed close to her daughter, smiling for the photos, nodding at the vows. But her eyes kept drifting toward the boat. Every few minutes, she'd glance over like she was hoping it had disappeared. It hadn't. I stepped outside again, leaned on my porch railing, just enough to remind her I was still here, still not moving it, still not budging. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. She knew exactly what this was. After the ceremony ended, the guests clapped. Music played. People started milling around, taking pictures. The limo driver got out again, walked around the vehicle, and stood there with his hands on his hips. He looked frustrated, but not surprised. I figured Karen had promised him it'd be a simple job. In and out, a quick pickup and drop-off. Instead, he was stuck babysitting a blocked limo on someone else's property. Eventually, Karen made her way over. Again, this time slower. Less angry, more defeated. She stopped on the edge of my lawn. "Okay," she said quieter now. "You made your point." I just raised an eyebrow. "Can you please move it now?" "The photographer wants to take pictures by the limo." I stayed silent for a second. Just let that hang in the air. "Pictures?" I said finally. "You want pictures with the illegally parked limo?" She sighed. "Look, I'm sorry. I should have asked. I thought it would be fine for a couple hours. I didn't mean for it to cause all this." It wasn't a full apology. Not even close. But it was the closest I'd ever seen her come to admitting she was wrong. I decided to let her stew in that moment a little longer. "Yeah," I said, "you should have asked." She nodded slowly. "I know." I didn't say anything else. Just looked at the boat. Then back at her. "I'll move in a bit," I said. "I've got something to take care of first." Her lips tightened, but she didn't argue. She turned and walked back toward the guests. The limo sat there, still trapped, still silent. I went back inside, took my time, made a sandwich, watched some videos. Karen had the nerve to throw a wedding on my street, block my driveway without a single word, and then act like I was the one ruining her day. Typical. About an hour passed. The sun was getting lower. Guests were starting to leave. A few of them approached the limo, probably thinking they were about to get in and head to the reception, only to realize they weren't going anywhere. A small group gathered. Karen tried to explain again. I could see her gesturing toward my house, doing that thing she always does with her hands when she's trying to sound innocent. More phone calls. More pacing. I waited until most of the crowd had cleared before I finally went outside. I walked over to the boat, unlocked the hitch, climbed into my SUV, and pulled forward just enough for the limo to squeeze out. I didn't say a word. The limo driver didn't either. He just jumped in, started the engine, and drove off as fast as he could without peeling out. Karen stood on the sidewalk, silent, watching. I didn't look at her. I just backed the boat into the side of my yard and parked it again, like it had never left. But we both knew something had changed. She had pushed too far. And for once, someone had pushed back. The neighborhood was quiet again by evening. The chairs were gone. The music had stopped. Most of the guests had cleared out. A few stray petals still floated down the sidewalk, like little reminders of what happened earlier. Karen's house was dark, curtains drawn, no lights on. I figured she wasn't in the mood for small talk, or for much of anything. I sat on my porch, a drink in hand, enjoying the peace. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had taken back a little space for myself. Not just the driveway, something more. The right to not be stepped on. To not have my time, my home, my space treated like a footnote in someone else's day. I knew she'd talk. Karen always did. She'd spin the story her way. Tell people I was unreasonable. That I ruined her daughter's special day. That I was dramatic, angry, difficult. That I escalated something that didn't need to be escalated. But that was fine. Let her talk. The people who mattered had seen the whole thing unfold. They knew who blocked who ignored who treated a neighbor's driveway like it was part of their party. And deep down, I think Karen knew it too. The next morning, something strange happened. I was taking the trash out, just minding my own business, when I noticed a small envelope on my porch. No name, no writing on the outside, just plain white. I picked it up, opened it. Inside was a simple card. It said, "Next time, I'll ask first. Karen." That was it. No dramatic apology. No excuse. Just those words. I stood there holding the card, kind of stunned. It wasn't much, but coming from her, it was something. Maybe this whole thing had made a dent after all. Maybe, just maybe, she realized the world didn't revolve around her clipboard. A few days passed. Things settled. The HOA sent out their usual monthly newsletter. No mention of the wedding. No passive-aggressive rants. Just gardening tips and a reminder to clean out our gutters before the rainy season. Karen didn't come by. Didn't wave when I passed her house. But she didn't bark orders either. That was enough for me. A week later, I was outside washing the boat, and Mr. Reynolds from across the street walked over. "That was a bold move," he said, grinning. I laughed. Felt right. "She needed that," he said. We all did. We chatted for a few minutes. Turns out I wasn't the only one tired of Karen's antics. She'd stepped on a lot of toes over the years. Mine just happened to be the one that pushed back. Sometimes it takes something big to shift things. Sometimes it just takes a boat.